bit. So we're glad of that, aren't we? Stand with us if you would. Ushers, come forward and we'll receive our morning offering. Rick, would you bless the offering for us, please?
Number 113. We have come into his house and gathered in his name to worship him. We have come into his house and gathered in his name to worship him. We have come into his house and gathered in his name to worship Christ the Lord. Worship him, Christ the Lord. So forget about yourself and concentrate on him and worship him. So forget about yourself and concentrate on him and worship him. So forget about yourself and concentrate on him and worship Christ the Lord. Worship him, Christ the Lord. Let us lift up holy hands and magnify his name and worship him. Let us lift up holy hands and magnify his name and worship him. Let us lift up holy hands and magnify his name and worship Christ the Lord. Worship him, Christ the Lord. Thank you.
And again, we thank you for the offering today. Any birthdays this week? Any birthdays? All right, how about anniversaries? Nope. Thank you. I'll move on. This afternoon at 2 p.m. over at Midway, we'll be having our Sunday school convention. And if you can, Brother Jacob and I would appreciate your support. Come over and be counted for Edinburgh. Why don't you? We might bring home a prize this year. So that's at 2 o'clock. Youth class will be here at 5 o'clock today. Tonight is mission night, Brother Nathan Hunter. All right. Several prayer requests today, so remember our request basket that's down here on the altar today. If you remember all those concerns, and if you would like to add to those, will you feel free to do that. Remember my wife, she's had COVID this week. The time we found out about it, quarantine period was all over. So that's the good part, but still remember her if you would. Vicki Sinclair, Paul and Martha Wheat, Jesse Gaskins and all of her family. Brother Randy Poston tested positive this morning for COVID, so remember him. Karen Burton is here, but remember her. Brother Greg Erdman's mother had a very difficult week, remember her. Dave, Juanita, and Kathy, remember them. Jim Hudson, Jackie's back with us today, but still remember her. Randy and Karen Jones, as well as her mom and dad. Sister Arsena Burton's sister passed away, Vivian, down in Columbia. So remember all of that family. The viewing is tomorrow and the funeral is on Tuesday. So remember all of that family if you would please. Any other requests that you might have this morning? lost children, yes. Yes, I remember that. Yeah. Much to be prayed about. Yeah. Yes, I remember that. Remember that family. Yeah. And, Sister Phyllis, remember her this week as well. Yeah. Any other requests that you might have before we pray? Yeah. Yeah. Sue the Bell. Remember her. Danny Kay, would you lead us in prayer and ask God's blessing upon the service? Amen. All righty. Anybody this morning come with a special song? You got one. Bring it. Yes, sir.
I think I can make it. I'll make it. I asked Glenda, I said, well, I'm going to try to sing this morning. She said, what are you going to sing? I said, I can't think of the name of it. She told me the name of it. So you've heard it before. This was my dad's song, but I'm going to sing this in remembrance of Marlene. She liked this song real well. My Father is omnipotent, and that you can't deny. A God of might and miracles, 'tis written in the sky. It took a miracle it took a miracle to hang the world in space. But when he saved my soul, cleansed and made me whole, it took a miracle of love and grace. Though here his glory has been shown, we still can't fully see the wonders of his might. His throne would take eternity. It took a miracle to put the stars in place. It took a miracle to hang the world in space. But when he saved my soul, cleansed and made me whole, it took a miracle of love and grace. The Bible tells us of his power and wisdom all the way through, and every little bird and flower are testimonies too. It took a miracle to put the stars in place. It took a to hang the world in space.
but when he saved my soul, cleansed and made me whole, it took a miracle of love and grace.
Thank you, Brother Danny. Anybody else got a special song today?
Anyone ever heard of Horatio Spafford? This man was born in 1828 and he died in 1888. What a life. I can't even begin to tell you what a godly man he was. In those 60 years that he lived on this earth, he lost a 4-year-old son to scarlet fever. He sent his wife and his 4 daughters on a trip overseas to hear D.L. Moody in Great Britain. He was evangelist, great evangelist. And Mr. Spafford and D.L. Moody were great friends. And while his wife and his 4 children are on this ship, that ship is hit by an iron tanker. All 4 of his daughters died in 3 miles of water. His wife is the only one who survived. She would have given up, but he told her not to lose her faith. He gets on a ship to go meet her overseas. I can't remember where the place is. And while he's on this ship, the captain of this ship calls him to the very place where his daughters perished in 3 miles of water. You'll understand all this in a minute. They went on to have 3 more children. He had 2 small boys, both named Horatio. He named them both Horatio. That son also passed away, and in those times, it happened a lot. It just did. They didn't have the medicines that they do now to heal people. He did have 2 daughters, though, that did live. They lived to adulthood, and Bertha became a lady that had much compassion, and she loved children and opened a children's hospital in Jerusalem where 60 beds were put to help orphan babies. So eventually, Horatio and his wife, they lived in Chicago. He lost a lot of property through the Chicago fire. He lost his home. It burnt down, and the insurance company tells him, we can't give you insurance monies for your house. It's an act of God. So he pretty much lost everything, 6 children, yet he did not lose his faith in God. When he's on that ship going overseas to meet his wife, and I don't remember where the place is, and I've told you that the captain let him know where his children perished at. He went into his cabin, and he come up with words, for it is well with my soul. Even in the midst of all this sadness, he did not lose his faith in God. And this man had such a testimony. He just helped the needy. He helped everyone in need, whatever they needed, him and his wife helped with. They eventually moved to Jerusalem, and that's where his life ended, was in Jerusalem. It was such a great story. It touched my heart, and I thought, well, I have to share this with all of you. Who's heard of Horatio Spafford? Now, he didn't write all the words to it as well with my soul. There was a man that it touched his heart, and he later wrote more words of this song, but it's such a good song. And, you know, there is nothing that Glenn and I have went through that compares to what this poor man and his wife went through. 6 children, plus lost everything, and yet he loved the Lord, and he's a testimony to me, him and his wife both. So this song is called It Is Well With My Soul. I know many of you have heard it. And bear with me, I've got a frog in my throat. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Though Satan should buffet, though trials should come, let this blessed assurance control, that Christ hath regarded my helpless estate, and hath shed his own blood for my soul. It is well with my soul, with my sin, oh, the bliss of this glory.
Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. The Lord has promised good to me. His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be, as long as life endures. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. His grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
All righty, thank you for those songs.
It seemed like it's been a long time ago. It ain't been all that long. Well, really hadn't. Good to see all of you who have come, and good to be back. Of course, I was here last Sunday, the piano, because I play along with some folks, so I just kind of stayed up here and stayed out of sight. But it's good to be back today, and we're going to be preaching. Everybody ready for number 4? The Ten Commandments more common to some than it is others. Nations have one commandment. Did you know that? About it. And we'll debate one another about it. And we don't ought to worship one God or not worship or things like that, you know, but boy, look out, buddy, here we come. And so we're going to that today. And if you get mad at me, it'll be all right. I won't fall out with you, okay? I want to read today in the book of Mark, chapter 2. And I'm going to tell you, before we even start reading here in Mark chapter 2, 9 of the directly. This one he does not. Does that surprise you? But he doesn't quote it directly. Is that interesting? Intrigued me. Now what he did, Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes, the elders at the time had their interpretation of each one of them, and he straightened out on every one of them. And guess what he did with this one? He straightened them out. Okay? Okay? Both of these incidents refer to that fourth commandment of the Sabbath day. Okay? And his day did not agree with the interpretation of the Sabbath. I've got this strong compulsion to follow what he has to say. It hasn't been divisive. For years, it's been divisive. There's a little hint here. We'll get back to it here in a little bit, but there's a little hint here of what we're going to talk about today. We're talking about the Sabbath day. Now, you're a bunch of separate Baptists out here, and if you wasn't, you'd be Methodist or Pentecostal or something else, and you're going to say, well, Sunday is the Sabbath day. I'm going to hit my button. Wrong answer. Okay? That's right, wrong answer. By the way, if you've never been to our youth camp in South Kentucky, I have the privilege and have for 40-some years of, we have a little drill where we ask questions of the kids, and when they get it wrong, they want me to hit that buzzer. I'm telling you, they'll walk by me and they'll punch me and go, every time. But anyway, I hit my buzzer. Wrong answer if you think Sunday is the Sabbath day, okay? Wrong answer. We'll get to that in a minute, okay? But let's look at what the original commandment was. Now, keep your finger here or mark it somehow. We're going to come back to it, okay? But let's go over into Exodus, Exodus chapter 20. And let's read the entire commandment, okay? I'm going to read the entire commandment. Because so often as we have looked at some of these others, we find out that we abbreviate them, don't we? Yeah. We tend to abbreviate these commandments, you know, and so we don't get the whole picture of what God is saying. And it's true with the fourth one, okay? So if you're over there in Exodus chapter 20, this will start in verse 8. And this is the only part that we like to quote. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Now let's read the rest of it, okay? Because it goes along with it. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is in thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. That's the whole commandment. Now, Sabbath does not mean Saturday. It does not mean Sunday. it has really no relevance to the word seven, other than that's what God said to do, rest the seventh day. The seventh day. Jesus said that the Sabbath was made for us, not we for the Sabbath. Medically speaking today, if you want to dive into this and really dig deep, medical science, even today, will tell you you need to take a break every 7 days. I was talking to a fellow here a couple of weeks ago, and he's going to do a little work for us down where I live. I decided I didn't want to do this job, so I found me a sub, you know. And I said, well, now, do you work full time? He said, I work 6 days, and I take off Sunday. I said, that's wonderful. I work 7. Boy, he crawled all over me, telling me I needed to get to church and everything else. And I said, just hold on, bud. I don't want to get you stirred up. I'm at church every Sunday, and I work harder on Sunday, medically speaking, than I do any other time of the week. 30 minutes of preaching is like working 8 hours. So I do a triple Ooh, silence. Because if you ain't working the other 6, how are you going to follow the meaning of the word Sabbath? What does it mean? It's a time of rest or cessation from your normal process or your normal activities. That's what it is. It's a time that you kind of regenerate, to regroup, okay? And I don't know, and this is one of the things that's a mystery to me, and I've never figured it out, but I don't know that God really was so tired he had to rest on the 7th day. I think God's bigger than that. But he did take that 7th day and say, you know what, I'm going to take this day off. I'm not creating anything else. And that's setting an example for us. That we would take that time, that we would take a break from our, and I hope you keep getting this thought that I'm trying to put across, that we would take a break from our usual activities. Okay? From your usual activities. So, that is an important thing that we do, right? We, as most churches in the world today, we worship on Sunday. And that's all right. We call it the Lord's Day. You ought to always call it the Lord's Day. The Lord's Day. You ought to always call it the Lord's Day. And a lot of people say, well, why do you do that? Well, because the early church began to do that. Well, why did they do that? Well, I don't have time here to teach you the whole lesson, but I'll tell you this. They couldn't worship on Saturday because the synagogue people didn't like them. Because that's when the people in the synagogue were worshiping. And so they couldn't gather together in the synagogue because the Jews were there, and the Jews didn't like them, and they were trying to kill them. So they said, okay, if you don't want us to worship on Saturday in your synagogue with you, since the Lord raised on the first day of the week, we'll just worship then. That's fine, isn't it? I don't have a problem with that. But buddy, you better be busy the other 6 days. You know, I keep threatening to retire. Up to now, it's been an idle threat. But, you know, I worry about people that do nothing. Now, I don't think I'll retire and do nothing. There's plenty to do, okay? You ever worry about people that do nothing? How do they know when they take a day off? I'm just asking because I don't know, see? When do they know when they're finished? It's a good question, isn't it? See, that's part of this commandment, isn't it? That you take that 7th day and you set it apart for your rest. That's what Sabbath means, okay? But it's also set apart to God. God blessed it. He called it holy. It's a day that you need to acknowledge God, okay? But he also said you need to be busy the other 6. And if you ain't busy the other 6, why are you bothered to take a day off? Now, you might be sitting back there saying, well, you know, I don't have a job I go to every day. Yeah, but you do stuff every day, don't you? You have a routine. Has anybody here got a routine, or am I just the only guy that does? Okay? Boy, I just hate to break that routine, but I do from time to time, you know. I even have a routine on Sunday, but it's different than the rest of the week. Okay, what God is expressing here is, folks, you need a break. You need to take some time off. Now, I don't know if you noticed this, but, well, let's just look back over here in Mark again. And I'm going to jump back to the Old Testament here in a minute, but I'm going to look back here in Mark again. Mark chapter 3. Look at verse 4. Jesus is talking to the good old Pharisees and Sadducees here, or looking for him to cause trouble, okay? And I want you to notice, and here's where you need to read it for what it says, just like every other time in the Bible, okay? And some of you probably didn't notice this when we read it. Even though I stressed it, you didn't notice it, okay? And you've overlooked it, okay? He said unto them, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath days? Did you get that? Plural. Or to do evil, to save life or to kill. Did you notice Sabbath days? Plural. We often talk about Sabbath day. We don't talk much about Sabbath days, do we? I'd like to have a lot of time to go into this, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time, okay? Mark this down. Leviticus chapter 23. Go home and read it. Don't read it now. I'm talking to you. But go home and read it, because you're going to find out in Leviticus chapter 23, not only does God, and Leviticus, by the way, is the law that Moses brought down from Mount Sinai. I'm going to freak you out right now. This was what was written on those 2 tablets of stone, not just. In Leviticus chapter 23, he not only talks about that Sabbath day of rest, to set it apart, to give your body time to rejuvenate, to regroup and all. But believe it or not, now this will freak you out just a little bit, he lists feasts. 7 of them. Feasts. 7 of them. And you know what? They don't all fall 7 days apart, or 7 months apart, or 7 weeks apart. Do you know they appear kind of randomly? But those are called Sabbath days. They are days that the children of Israel were supposed to set apart to worship God and to be reminded of all that God had done for them. We have Passover, we have the unleavened bread, we have the Feast of First Fruits, we have Pentecost, we have the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, the Feast of Tabernacles, all those, and no work was supposed to be done during those times. Why? Because those were times to remember what God did for them. Pentecost. Sunday school class this morning, you might International Sunday School lesson. Can we I'm trying to inform you as well as, encourage you today. From Lamb was killed, the giving on Mount Sinai was 7 weeks and 1 day. Okay, mathematicians, how long is that? Yeah. And 1 Pentecost. 40 years in the wilderness. They weren't supposed to work then either. A lot of vacation. People get all tore up at Christmas. But I wish the world had. We're talking about taking some time off to rest, right? I mean, to do what God wants us to do. All of this, God is trying to show us that people we get right now is chapter 23, and you'll find out about those 7 feasts. of and the year of Jubilee, because it's all spelled out in there. What you're is what he's you rest once in a while. Take that and have a lot of fun and see and all that, although that's okay. The Sabbath, so that we will rejuvenate physically, okay? But God, our hearts on Him. Why? Because we don't put up with the cares on that day, right? Off. I got a feeling somebody go home on Sunday afternoon and you're making and sit down. Would you just TV off and the radio and just get out on the front and watch at nature and listen? Paul told us over in Romans chapter 1, didn't he? That nature itself will show us there's a God. We have a lot of trouble our minds for 6 days and take a day off. Just think about God and Him. That's what we need to do, don't we? You know, Brother Dan, my mind just rest. I had to rebuild. Get a thing in. Stands kind of broke down here, you know. That's what that episode was about, was it? You know what that episode, believe it or not, some people have to work on Sunday, and they need to, and I'm glad they do. I don't have to work at all on Sunday. Well, then give me a day off. No, that ain't happening. I'm all right, okay? Because I'm not doing my usual job. I'm cool with it, okay? I enjoy Sundays. I don't know if you do or not, but I enjoy them, okay? I enjoy them. Let's get back over here. Let's find that Jesus and his disciples are walking through the cornfield. Was it really corn? Not a chance in the world. Corn, as you know it, is actually a North American product. That's all it is, okay? Over there, what the writers here, the translators of the scripture, and you can go back to Tyndale, he calls it corn too, okay, because he was English, but when you begin to look at that, this is what they called any crop of grain like wheat or oats or barley or rye or anything, okay? And you guys have all seen that, okay? I know a few years ago, and I don't know how many years ago it was, but Indiana had the ugliest license plates in the history of license plates. Because they had that one that looked like amber waves of grain. And it was, I looked at that and I thought, what in the world is that? That's an ugly license plate. Because there is a lot of wheat and things like that grown here, right? Well, that's what they grew over there, okay? And as his disciples are walking through, they're hungry. What do you do when you get hungry? We eat, don't we? You can tell by looking at most of us, we eat, okay? And not always the right thing. But these guys are walking through the field, and they're hungry. And so while they're just casually walking through, now they're not thrashing wheat here, okay? But they're pulling off the grains, the head of the grain. They're rubbing it together to where the husk will come off. And boy, I got little seeds there, which is what we eat with flour and all that stuff, okay? Popping it in their mouth and just having a good time. And the Pharisees are going, look, Lord, what's wrong with you and your disciples out there? Why, they're out here, they're gathering in a crop and they're thrashing the wheat. And that's not right. That's unlawful on the Sabbath day. You would have thought Jesus would have looked at them and said, you guys get somewhere and shut up. But he didn't, did he? No, he brought up a story. How many of you have read this story that Jesus relates to us here? He said, don't you remember David? And at this point, David was running from King Saul. Don't you remember when David and his men were hungry and they stopped by? And it wouldn't have been the temple, it would have been the tent, okay, the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, because the temple hadn't been built yet. He stopped by, and he's hungry, and he goes to the priest, Abiathar, and he says, have you got any bread for us to eat? Go back there and read it in Samuel if you want to. Have you got anything for us to eat? And the priest says, no, don't have anything but the showbread. that's meant for us as priests. And David said, well, we're hungry. Can you give us anything? He said, sure, here's 6 loaves. That was against the law. David wasn't supposed to eat that stuff. But listen, you know why Jesus brings up David? Because these Pharisees and Sadducees respect David. In their minds, he never did anything wrong. David messed up a lot of times, didn't he? But Jesus uses him as an example for this reason. Man's not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath for man. That's what he said afterwards, right? How come God just didn't strike David down? I mean, he did sometimes, didn't he, when people sinned? He'd just eliminate them right there. Why didn't he just knock David down and get rid of him? Because the need that David had was greater than the sanctity of those 6 loaves of bread. The need was greater. He says here, but God didn't object, did he? You know why? Because the need of David was greater than the need of the loaves of bread. Are you guys grabbing that? See, some things are important, aren't they? It's okay. Verses 1 through. And is it good to do good on the Sabbath? Another place. Might have called it. Okay? Because the need. Some of you at me awful funny. Don't go kicking. Are you guys getting all this? Some things are important. We have to tend to them, don't we? We have to tend to them. Listen, you remember when they're out there wandering in the wilderness and God gives them manna from heaven and he tells them on the 6th day, go out and gather twice as much as you do every other day because you're going to need that tomorrow because tomorrow I'm not sending you manna. Remember that story? And if you go out and you don't collect it, you're going to be hungry tomorrow. Okay? And if you collect too much on the other days, I'm going to spoil that. You get just enough to get you by. And there's a whole other story and a whole other message in all of that, okay? Now, I don't know how you cook manna. Do you? I'm not quite sure how you prepare that. I've always pictured manna kind of like potatoes. You can cook it anyway. You know, you can bake a potato. You can fry a potato. You can mash a potato. You can do all kind of things to potatoes, right? And let me tell you, if I was eating manna in the wilderness for 40 years, I think I would have tried every way I could to cook manna. I think I would have, right? And you would too. Now, I want you to get this, okay? God said collect twice as much on the 6th day as you do every other day so you have something to eat tomorrow, but he didn't say they couldn't cook it. Some people freak out. You mean they could cook on the Sabbath day? Yep. Kind of necessary, ain't it? I've always, and I don't mind saying this, and I've said it to a lot of the preachers' faces that you guys know, and I'm not going to call their names, okay? Would not eat out on Sunday for no amount of money, wouldn't be traveling down the road and stop by a McDonald's and get a hamburger because I'm making them people work, but will go home and say, honey, go cook me some beans and taters.
Yeah, come on, preacher.
Do you understand how ignorant that is?
Come on, preacher.
Give me a break. I knew one guy, and you did too, that if he was in Kentucky and going to come back to Indiana, he'd put 2 5-gallon cans of gas in the back of his car so he can make it back home without stopping to get gas. Do you know how crazy that is? I don't want to violate the Sabbath. Man, how ignorant can we get in life sometimes, right? Jesus is saying it's okay to do good. When the need of the individual is great, you step out of the bounds of your resting and you help them. Amen. If the ox falls into the ditch and can't get itself back out, and we don't even think about it today, because we all grow up with everything and we think we get all of our food from J.C. or Kroger or Walmart or wherever you shop at, okay? We don't realize that back in those days, if a man had an ox, that was the one animal that helped him raise his food. That was important to him. He had to save that animal. Listen, is it good? Jesus said, is it good to do good or evil, to save life or to kill on the Sabbath day? What's more important? The answer is easy, isn't it? It's to do good. It's to save life. Some of you here are in the medical field, or some of you have been in the medical field. Did you not have to work on Sundays? Why? Because it's good to save lives. Are you breaking the Sabbath? No. You know why? Because if you work at the doctor's office or the hospital or a clinic, wherever you work, and listen, I thank God they're open 24/7, 365. But if you're working there and they require that you work there at least once a month or every other week, they give you another day off, don't they? Why? Because they know you need a break. Well, we fight over this stuff in the church, don't we? We fight over it to the point that, I don't know, it's just almost disgusting. In Mark chapter 2, where these guys are eating, they're doing what is necessary. Are there things that's necessary that we do on Sunday? I can tell you this, I don't know who's in charge of that stinking noise outside the door here, but if they don't hurry up, they're going to be working today too. Brother Jimmy's convinced it's a transformer, and I said, well, it might get dark about middle ways of service. And somebody said, well, you'll have to talk louder, but I remember the days we didn't have a PA system. I'd just raise my voice and keep going. But if they'll fix it today, they won't have to worry about it tomorrow, because that's necessary, isn't it, in our world that we live in? You guys are getting the picture here, aren't you? A day needs to set aside to rest, to rejuvenate, and to cease from our daily usual activities and to focus on the things of God. And that's what we're supposed to do when we come to church, focus on the things of God, ain't we? Why do we fight over such things? We want to prove our right. We want to say we're right, don't we? Boy, I've heard the Seventh-day Adventists and the Separate Baptists just about fight one another over which day you ought to worship on. I know of two different churches. One of them's in Columbia and one of them's in Indianapolis, where the Seventh-day Adventists use it on Saturday and somebody else uses it on Sunday, and they get along just fine. You know why? Because they're all worshiping the same Lord, and they're all taking one day off to rest and to worship the same Lord, and so it really don't make much difference, does it? Oh, you say, so then I get to pick my day? Well, I got news for you. If you come here on Tuesday, we ain't going to be here. You might want to join in the same day we're here to worship, okay? You might want to make this a corporate thing where we all come together, okay? And trust me, I feel so blessed when I look on this calendar once a week, usually on Sunday morning as I'm walking out to find out where I'm going to go have lunch. I'm glad that person is not so stubborn that they don't cook something and ask me over. Unless, of course, I go to Jimmy the Deacon's house and I get bologna, and that's good too. I don't have a problem with that. Some people say, you mean he really gives you bologna? You do, don't you, brother? It's pretty good stuff, ain't it? We've enjoyed several sandwiches together. Yeah, if you go to Lawler's, you're liable to get possum, and that's good too. See? We do what's necessary, don't we? But we need that day. We need it to rest. But what the law is saying here is if you don't work the rest of the time, don't bother taking off the seventh day. You've just had a whole bunch of Sabbaths. Do your usual routine. I'm not talking about going to the job. Listen, we live in a society today that thinks if a woman don't raise a family and go to work too, she's worthless. Let me tell you something. A woman staying home and raising her children is the noblest job a woman can have. And Mother's Day's what, 2 weeks? Next week, isn't it? Oh, we might talk about you next week. That's a noble profession, isn't it? And let me tell you something. You don't stop on Sunday raising kids. No, my mother'd beat me on Sunday just like she would on Monday. She'd correct me every day. She's hoping for a break on Sunday, but I didn't always give her one because I couldn't help myself. But that's a great profession, isn't it? Now, she didn't go do the laundry, and she didn't do a lot of other things that she did, you know, but Sunday she stopped her usual routine, and you've all got it, right? You know, a lot of you probably got your little schedule made out. On Monday, I do this. On Tuesday, I do that. On Wednesday, here's something else that needs to be done in my home. Do you do that? I do that at my house, right? This is the day I do laundry. This is the day I mop the floor. This is the day I dust. You know what I'm talking about? Quit doing that on Sunday. Just sit down, relax. Stop your usual routine. That's what it's talking about. Take a break and put your mind on God, who has given you life and given you the privilege and set the example of you not doing something every seventh day. A Sabbath, it's a day of rest. We have our holidays and we have our days of rest, right? I know it's kind of stressful to you when Thanksgiving comes around and you got to figure out how many people you're going to feed and how big the turkey ought to be and how you're going to cook it and all that stuff. But let's face it, you don't do your usual job on Thanksgiving Day, do you? No, you want to gather with the family, and you are just wore out by the end of the day, but you sit down at the end of the day and you go to what? I have enjoyed the fellowship that I had today. It's a Sabbath, isn't it? See, that's what those other festivals are all about, is to be, and we've lost sight of what Thanksgiving's about here in America, haven't we? I mean, that's a day that we are supposed to take off and thank God for what He's done for us in this country, for His great providence toward us. And we've lost sight of that. Now it's just a time for families to get together and argue and fight and watch football. And they'll argue and fight over that. Would we quit doing that stuff? I mean, this is a commandment from God, as big a commandment as one God, and He's the only one you serve, right? As big a commandment as thou shalt not, worship any graven, as big as that, okay? And all the other commandments, this one is just as important. Take some time off. Quit arguing about it. Quit fighting about it. Quit trying to find fault with one another. See, that was the problem of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They were always looking for something to trip Jesus up about and to find fault with Him. They had rewritten the book so much that they even limited how far they could walk. I think I mentioned that here a while back, didn't I? Yeah, you got a Sabbath day's journey. You ever heard of that term? Yeah, it's mentioned one time in the Bible, but we talk about it. Do you know you can go back in the book of Leviticus and Exodus and even Numbers and Deuteronomy? You will never find the term Sabbath day journey. You know why? Because it was man-made. And there's a lot of other man-made things we've made up to contribute to it, when all God said, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Cease from your daily routine. Cease from your labors that you've done for 6 days and take a break off. Do yourself a favor. Lower your blood pressure. Lower your stress level. Push all that aside. Just stop and concentrate on Him and worship Him. And it'll do your body whole bunches of good. Do we do that? Well, I hope you do, because that's what that commandment's all about. And sometimes our need outweighs our reasoning to sit around and do nothing, right? And we have to get up and do something. Those of you who are in the medical field, thank God for you and the work that you do. Thank God that the police force is still out here driving up and down the roads, watching, trying to protect us and to keep order. Don't you think so? See, I'm not a defund the police guy. I say put more of them out there. Thank God for the one who's watching the jail and the prison and keeping those guys in there and feeding them and taking care of them. Don't you agree? Thank God for the fire person that's down here in the firehouse and may not have to do anything today, but just in case, they can go out, can't they? And maybe the EMS, the emergency medical services, won't make a run today, but thank God they're there in case we need them. Listen, I'm not going to blast all those people. You know why? Because it's necessary. You go out and have an accident today, you'll thank God for them. You know what I'm saying? I can't hardly see it, but if people start rioting here in Edinburgh, I think the police force will show up, don't you, and save you from them? Thank God for them. Okay? Just don't be stupid about it. Like putting gas in the back of your car so you can make it another 50 miles. I used to pray for them folks every time I knew they was going back home, saying, Lord, don't let them get hit in the back end. They will be toast. We don't need that. Okay? Don't make him go home and make his wife cook when he won't stop and get her a bologna sandwich. Oh, but that's different. No, it's not. Is it? No, it's cutting off your nose to spite your face. Say, yeah, but if I go down here to McDonald's, them people have to work. If they don't want to, they don't have to. It's still America, ain't it? See, that's what I told my former employer when I told him I was tired and I wanted to quit. He said, you can't quit. I said, oh, yes, I can. He tried to get me to do an extra job. I was done covering 3 positions and had one more that I was trying to get filled, and I kept telling him everything I was doing. He said, you can't. And I said, let me tell you something. This is America. I can quit if I want to. Whether you go to McDonald's or not, you can be that one holdout. And I don't know why I'm picking on McDonald's. I don't even like McDonald's, but I guess it's convenient. But you know, you're sitting there, well, if I go down there, I'll make them people work. Drive by and see if and don't stop and see if them people are working. They're working. You know why? Because they want to make a buck. That's what the management wants. And the rest of them people are feeding somebody. What were them disciples doing? Feeding themselves. Okay? I'm not mad at them people down here working at McDonald's or Hardee's or Arby's or any of them other restaurants any more than I would be mad at you nurses and you doctors who are working on Sunday to preserve life. Now you're all going to be mad at me. I might get stoned before I leave Edinburgh Church. That's okay. Just hit me hard enough to kill me because I can go home then and won't have to worry about it, okay? You guys understand what I'm saying here today? We have fought and we have beat each other over this stuff. And Jesus said, listen, we weren't made for the Sabbath. We're not little robots that we shut down every 7th day and we don't do anything. The Sabbath was made for us to take advantage of it and to rejuvenate, to clear our minds, and to worship God. That's why God said rest on that day. It wasn't for any other reason. Now, some of you is going to go away and say, well, he said it's all right to go down here to McDonald's and buy on Sunday. If you don't want to go to McDonald's and buy on Sunday, don't. If it bothers you, don't. Okay? I grew up that way. I don't. Okay? And I'm not going to fuss at you if you do. I know some of you. Yeah, you leave your cars parked across the road in the parking lot and go out to eat on Sunday. Bunch of sinners. And I ain't naming you. Do I have the right to say that about them? No. Maybe they've been cooking all week and they just don't want to cook today. I don't know. I choose not to act like a Pharisee. But I like to take a day off once in a while. Does everybody know here that I take a day off from study? I study most of the time. I read and I do all. I'm preparing. You know that? I still spend about 20 hours every week preparing for Sunday morning. Now, Sunday night, you're just going to get with whatever comes to my mind. I'm sorry. Okay? But do you know I take a day off from that? Monday. Monday, after I come home from my usual job, I kick back and I do nothing. I vegetate. But once in a while, somebody will call and go, I know this is your time off, but, and that's okay, because it's out of necessity, and I'll answer. Are you guys clear on this 4th commandment? See, we don't need to beat each other off. We don't. We don't need to fight about it. We just need to realize that God said, take some time off, people. Or as we used to say, take a chill pill, buddy. Relax. Kick your feet up. Think about God during this day. If He don't cross your mind any other day of the week, take this day, would you? Just take this day and stop. And more, I'm talking about more than Sunday school and morning worship and Sunday night service, okay? Take some time this afternoon to just kick your feet up in your favorite recliner. Of course, if you're very old, you'll fall asleep, but that's resting, right? I mean, I see that on Facebook once in a while, how to fall asleep in a chair, be old and sit down, and that's true. Okay? I understand that the older I get. But you know what? You're resting while you're there, right? And let your mind intertwine with the thoughts of God. This is what it's about. We need to quit beating each other up. and start living our lives as Jesus has showed us here. It's okay to do good. It's okay to feed yourself. If the ox is in the ditch, it's okay to get him out. If there's something you need to do to fulfill your obligation to God, do it, even if it is on the Sabbath day. See, that's the only reason why I'm standing up here preaching on the Sabbath day is because I'm fulfilling my obligation to God. Because I'd just as soon sit back there with you and listen to somebody else, but that's not my calling. I've got to do this, okay? Are we clear on the fourth commandment? Oh, I hope so, because I ain't got nothing else to say about it. I've worked just to get this because I wanted to get it clear to you today that God gave us that day, and we are to take advantage of it, right? And I don't know, I didn't even get into this, but it's 1:15 right now, and you're not too hungry yet, but I'll tell you this. The writer of the book of Hebrews said, for those who are Christians, there remaineth a Sabbath of rest yet for us. You know what that is? Eternal life. Man, take advantage of it while you got it here. Trust God for what you need. If I worked with a fellow, worked around him one time. I was working on a house there. One of my fellow pastors was building a house, and he couldn't get my work on it, so I'd go over there every time I could and work on it a little bit, and the bricklayer was there, and he told me, he said, man, I used to work 7 days a week. He said, I didn't take a day off. I worked as hard as I could, and he said, then I got saved, and I got to thinking, well, maybe I need to take Sunday off, but what do I do if I take Sunday off? I'm just barely making it by now, can't make enough money, so I had to work on Sunday to make money, and he said, I have worked myself to death, and he said, I got saved, and I decided I'd take Sunday off and see what had happened, and he said, the year I took Sunday off, I made more money than I did all those years that I was working on Sunday trying to provide for my family. And I said, I wonder why that happened. He said, because God takes care of us. Bingo! Little light went off. God takes care of us, doesn't he? Yes, he does. And he expects us, believe it or not, to take care of ourselves. Isn't that right? Heard from a young lady today, or this week, not today. She feels like she's overweight. She's concerned with it, and she sent me a text, and she says, what does the Bible say about having surgery, removing body parts? And all? She's worried about it. And I said, well, it doesn't say anything about it. Why? She said, well, I feel like I'm way overweight, and I'm going to have some surgery so I'll lose weight. What does the Bible say about that? I said, as far as I know, it don't say anything. She said, what do you think about it? I said, I think your body's a temple of the Holy Ghost, and he wants you to take care of it the best that you can. And if you feel like your weight is interfering with your health, I'd go get that surgery. So you would? Sure. Because this is the only body you're ever going to get. Take care of it, which is a good reason for you to take a day off. Take care of it. Well, how do we end this message, Jim? Say amen and go home? Stand with me. Brother Dan, you got a song we can dismiss on? Come on. You can sing that chorus, I'll say yes, Lord, yes. If you don't do that, it'd be good enough. I see you're not going away too mad. There's smiles on most of your faces. I feel safe. I were going to get stoned today, but... we love you and appreciate you, and I want you to follow the laws of God. I do, and I think it's important that you take that time off. Matter of fact, I think it's important that you not only take that one day off, but sometimes you need to take a week off. You just need to go and sit there. And most of you are thinking, well, I want to go sit down by the beach and put my feet out there in the sand. Go for it. Go for it. Go up in the mountains and sit on top of a mountain peak. Oh, listen, I love to go to North Carolina and go to their association, and during the Friday afternoon and Friday evening sessions, you usually got a couple of hours, and I like to drive up on top of Mount Jefferson, which is right between Jefferson and West Jefferson, and sit up there and go all the way out to what they call the Luther Rock, and sit down on the Luther Rock and look across that big valley and see the New River just flowing, and hear those birds singing. You talk about peaceful. And just think of the greatness of God. Man, he's good, isn't he? But we need to pause and consider him, because that's part of the Sabbath. Go ahead, Brother Dan, before I take off again.
I'll say yes, Lord, yes, to your will and to your way. I'll say yes, Lord, yes, I will trust you and obey. When your Spirit speaks to me, with my whole heart I'll agree.
May God bless you today. Hope we've said or read or done something to encourage you to understand it's still a commandment of God for you to take a break. Okay? And so I hope that you do. But I hope that you also understand that it's not necessarily Saturday or Sunday, but there's 7 other feasts that the Jews had to observe. And then they had those years. God's just simply saying, quit being so busy and take a break. Clear your mind, clear your body, and concentrate on Him. He took a break. If God can take a break, I can too. How about that? Anybody have a word before we dismiss our service today? Women of Vision, real quick, in Donald, well, that's the mixed adults classroom. I don't want to give it to Don. I mean, he's in there, but you know. Okay, be this first one here as you go down. Okay, anybody else? Right. I don't think Jessica will allow that. So. That's you, Brother Rick. That's you. Now, see, I grew up in a very strict Christian home. We didn't buy anything on Sunday. We didn't sell anything on Sunday. My parents did not buy gas. Dad always bought a car that would get us from Kentucky to Indianapolis without stopping to get gas. They were very adamant about that. You know what I'm saying? And I understand that. And if you feel that way, live that way, would you? But still take a day off and worship God, okay? But don't get mad at other people. No, because that's acting like the Pharisees in Mark chapter 2 and 3, isn't it? And David stepped out of bounds. But you know what? It was all right with God because the need of David was greater than those priests eating those 6 loaves of bread. Anybody else?